Okay, this is module 14, the video for module 14, and we're nearing the end. Yay. All right, so spring, chapter 14. Um, there's a lot of information in spring, chapter 14, and this particular chapter is very important for current teachers, for those of you going into the teaching field, certainly. Probably the history here, the legislative history in this chapter is extremely important to your jobs that you'll be doing in the classroom. Spring is basically going to, sort of take you down memory lane of all the different major legislative acts that have affected teaching and the profession, and how you do your job and to whom you do your job for. That's probably not correct, but correct grammar. But it's very, very important. All of these things will affect you. I can tell you from experience, as a public school teacher for 14 years, that these particular, this is when things really started to change, was after 1965. And much, we learn a lot of history in spring, and it's all very important history because it kind of, it shows you how we got to where we are today. We talked about the common school at the beginning of this semester, and chapter 14 is going to lead you down the lane and let you see how the common school ideals are still with us, and how we really do want to provide as a society opportunities and an education, especially for all students. And it's just how we go about, getting there. So in spring chapter, and there's a PowerPoint where I try to sum up a lot of spring's important information here. But, obviously the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is huge. And one of the reasons it's huge for education, obviously it's huge for us as a society, but it's huge for education in the respect that Brown v. Board, happened 10 years before this. How much success actually, many of you watched the movie Ruby Bridges for your essay, your critique essay, and that was in 1960, so in New Orleans, things didn't even start to be desegregated until then. I grew up in California, so it was a little bit of a different situation for me, but I have friends who've told me that even when they were in high school in the mid to late 70s, that a lot of this was going on and desegregation still hadn't happened in the South. So, and in the South it required a lot of work with busing and different issues regarding that Spring talks about in chapter 14, and there are many books about that topic as well. But just know that in 1964, when the Civil Rights Act was passed, it put teeth, so to speak, into Brown v. Board of Education. Now there was a legal way. Remember when they passed, if you watch the excerpts from Simple Justice, when they passed Brown v. Board, one of the biggest problems that the justices had was how do we do this? Okay, we're going to pass this or we're going to overturn this this lawsuit. But then how on earth are we going to mandate this? How what are the steps? And of course, Marshall at the time he said, well, that's not my job, is to tell you how this is going to take place. That's, legislators' jobs or police jobs or executive position jobs, these types of things. But essentially 1964 in the Civil Rights Act, it basically allows suits. It allows federal lawsuits to come against any districts or institutions that practice discriminatory, practices. So if they are practicing discrimination, federal funds can be withheld. And, you put money in, you involve money into it at any time, and that's usually going to start changing people's behaviors, if not changing their opinions. But, sometimes changing behaviors has to happen first, before deeper, changes in society can happen. So that was really crucial. And then you've got the Bilingual Education Act. This was really big because this also allowed for extra money to go to schools who could come up with innovative ways to approach teaching They called them LESAs, limited English speaking ability. I think we're LEP now. There's lots of different terms, limited English proficiency, but basically addressing the issue of students who cannot speak English very well, which of course came from the change in the Immigration Act in 1965, which again, opened the gates again to immigration coming into this country. It closed down the quota system that had been put in place in 1924, if you recall. And, now we've got a huge population of students coming into the country, and it's no longer, the Italians and Irish from Europe, but it's more from North America, okay, or Central America, coming in from Mexico, obviously majoritively, and Asia. So you'll see that there's a huge increase in, the bilingual education becoming important. And we are still trying to, the educational system is still trying to catch up with how to deal with those problems. And then the IDEA. So you've got, that's the Individual with Disabilities in Education Act, something like that. Individuals with Disabilities Act, Education Act. And that's in 1965. So, I'm sorry, 1975. And so now all students with disabilities are basically required to be served in what's called the least restrictive environment, the LRE. So, it's trying to get away from, hiding kids in a single classroom, not providing them the same educational opportunities to interact with their peers, and so forth. And it comes up, this is where you come up with IEPs, which as teachers you will become very familiar with. And, it finally sort of caps out that as a society, we want to give everyone an opportunity at a good education. We want to give all races and ethnicities an opportunity at a good education. We want to help those who can't speak English. And we want to help those who have any kind of disability also get the best education that we can give them. So, and then of course the end of the chapter talks about resegregation and how there were some, I think in the early 90s, maybe late 80s, there were some court cases that went through that overturned a lot of busing and desegregation court mandates. There was a lot of mandates out there that were forced a lot of places, like in Oklahoma, I know was one, to desegregate. And because people lived in segregated communities, that was really difficult to do because you were busing kids, and that's an issue that's still, with us today in many ways. But ever since they started overturning all of those mandates, resegregation has taken hold in this country. And there was a Harvard study in the year 2000 that basically said that we are more segregated today than we were in 1970 in many places, and including not just the South, including California, including Los Angeles, including San Francisco, large metropolitan areas, in New York. Okay, so this is a problem. This is a problem in society because, again, separate but equal, and many different issues that we see surrounding funding of areas where you have high poverty rates and so forth. So he talks a lot about that in chapter 14. And then in Ravitch, you're reading her last chapter. There is an epilogue, but you're reading her last chapter. And in chapter 11, she talks about, lessons learned and what she feels has to happen in order for, good reform to take hold in this country. And she basically says, we're on the wrong track. And she wrote the book originally, or published it in 2010, and not much has changed in the right direction, unfortunately. So, she sort of sums up her views on it, and, she quickly, she says shortcuts and quick change is not the way for education. You can't restructure education every couple of years with the changing out of the president, or the legislative body or whatever. You can't just keep doing this without keeping in mind what education truly is for, education as a public good. And, if we're letting it be privatized and corporatized, this public good, You know, is it going to remain a public good, or is it then just going to become one more tool for Wall Street to use and make money off of? And is it going to still provide opportunities for everyone, or are the haves and the have-nots, you know, the gap is just going to grow wider for many? That's what many people believe. Anyway, so that's Ravage chapter 11. And then you're going to read an article again, very important article, Plyler v. Doe. And the reason that this is important is because it is essentially what allows undocumented children to still get an education in this country. And it's a very hot topic right now, obviously. But you know, no matter what you feel about it, you're going to have these children in your classroom, and you know, how you deal with it obviously is going to be affected by legislative mandates that come across, you know, in the future and so forth. But if you go back to Plyler v. Doe, this is the one that basically allows undocumented children to get an education in this country. So you're going to read that article. It's very short, and then I provided a PowerPoint where I try to summarize some of the main points. And then your journal response is going to be regarding this. I'm going to ask you to sort of summarize, you know, Brennan's majority opinion and Berger's dissenting opinion, and, you know, tell me what you feel about each, because they're very good positions for each side. Really, it's a really tough decision to look at. It really is. It hinges on the 14th Amendment. It hinges on the clause that talks about equal protection under the law. Equal protection is provided to persons, not citizens, to persons. These are people within, you know, the state of Texas or the district, whatever it was in Texas. And, you know, it makes a good argument in that respect, and that the failure to provide an education is a lifelong debilitating thing that happens to people. So, you know, make a good, but Berger makes a very good argument as well in his dissenting opinion. And what he says, you know, he says a lot of things, but I think one of the biggest things he says is this is not the court's job. We are taking on a legislative capacity here because the legislative branch, because Congress won't do their job. You know, we're being forced to have to make a decision here that we shouldn't have to make. So please read through that very brief summary article of their opinions, and then respond to the journal response. I'll be interested to read, you know, how you guys feel about that. Okay, so then for the discussion post this time around, what we're going to do is you're going to upload your critical issue project into your discussion post. And then, you know, so make sure it's going to be in a clear format for everybody to read, which you should have done if it was for me. Anyway, so then you're going to go in and you're going to find 2 critical issue projects that, you know, that you would like to read, that you would like to view. So view 2, okay? So you're going to post yours, and then you're going to go in and view 2 of your colleagues, your cohort, their presentations, and then you're going to hopefully substantively respond. You know, tell them what you really liked about it. Give them constructive criticism about how they might make their argument better, their slides better. You know, ask them questions. You know, well, wait a minute, what about this? And I gave you some guidelines as to how to do that in the discussion post. So that's what you're going to do for the discussion post this time around. And remember, your field experience report is coming up due. So that will be due in the next module, in module 15. So I hope that all of you are, you know, ready for that as well. Okay, so that was module 14, and I will talk to you again in module 15.